The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development. With a magazine and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives. At The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Hey, we're back. We're here. I'm live in the Best You EXPO, and it's day six. Day six. Well, if you're watching this as a recording, that means absolutely nothing to you. But we ran a 7-day expo, or we're running right now a 7-day expo if you're watching it live. And it's our first virtual expo, and it's been an amazing week. I'm so excited of everything that I've learned and everything that we've experienced and all the kind words that people have said to us over this last week, because, we've had so many amazing people joining us. And obviously that's the likes of, Les Brown, which was an amazing highlight, Jack Canfield. We've had so many great speakers, Doug Vermeeren, and we've got so many more. We have Marissa Peer and so many more coming. But I'm so excited to have a good friend of mine, Doug Vermeeren, who's going to be joining me today, who, well, for me is just it's just been a blessing to count him as one of my friends, someone that I can call and I can just listen. That's what I do. When I normally speak to Doug, I don't speak a lot. I just listen because he's a man that has a lot of knowledge. So I'm going to bring him in and then I'm going to do a very brief introduction. Hey, Doug, how are you?
Bernardo, you mentioned the other Doug.
What? I'm very confused. This is Doug Ivanovich.
There you go.
Doug Vermeeren joining me this morning. And this is the man. I'm talking about the right man. I've just said the wrong surname. So I do apologize. This is Doug Ivanovich, the Doug Ivanovich, who I count as a blessing to have as a friend, someone that I call frequently. And he just tells me what his new projects are. So, Doug, thank you so much for speaking here at the Best You EXPO. We're delighted to have you.
It's my pleasure. And I'm very excited about the success, the growth of the Best You and the prospects and opportunities. The incredible lineup you have. I mean, they're old friends. Jack Canfield is like a dear brother forever. Dr. John DeMartini. Somebody just mentioned Barbara Marks Hubbard, who I was very close to for 35 years. And,
lovely.
It's a list of, remember I mentioned PLUs, people like us, Yeah. And that's what I need. Sometimes that's what we all need. Sometimes people say, what's going to happen to our world? How are we going to get out of this? Who's going to win the day? And I always feel like the PLUs ought to win the day. Whoever gathers the most conscious people together to inspire the greatest number of people, to touch the greatest number of hearts and lift the spirit of humanity, to be totally inclusive, that's who should win the day and who we expect will win the day. Wow. So we have work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. You've done a lot already. So Doug Ivanovich is the founder of World Peace One Foundation, WP1 Concerts, and the Stormade Foundation, where he is executive director. Doug writes and lectures on spiritual, social, cultural, and environmental topics, and on virtues, values, ethics, and a deeper way of learning, living, and being. Doug is a longtime peace activist, global strategist, and citizen diplomat who vigorously promotes ecology, earth restoration, human rights, sustainability, ending human trafficking, alternative energy, and a host of new global problem-solving technologies. Now, those are all very big words, but trust me, this man has a finger in all the pies. So the first person that's extremely excited to listen to you speak is me, Doug, and I'm going to give you the microphone, and that's it. I'm here behind the scenes. Over to you. Well, thank you so much.
Bernardo, it's always a pleasure. I want to talk a little bit about the topic first, or introduce the topic. I chose it for obvious reasons. It's more or less our state of the world, or addressing our state of the world, perhaps the best way that I can at this moment. And so I chose the topic of rebooting humanity, inspiration, restoration, and graduation. And so during this talk, I will focus on each of those categories. But I thought I would just start with a little bit of history. I was a musician for much of my life. Sometimes traveling around would afford me the opportunity of spending a lot of time in the travel reading, and sometimes in motels and hotels, in between the gigs. I'd have a lot of time to read. And so I would read some of the classics. I'd read, as much as I could about religion, philosophy, transformational psychology, whole systems, holistic health, social investing, and so on. And it just kind of gave me a background. At a certain point, though I fancied myself as a modern mystic or an ancient mystic in modern dress, at a certain point, I thought, with the advent of so much technology, that has to be happening for a reason. The advancement of consciousness, the evolution of consciousness, of humanity. And I thought we need to ensoul technology and dedicate its application to grander and nobler purposes. And so I thought the equivalent of sitting and meditating in a cave or just going inward, which is beautiful, magnificent, empowering, enlightening, get to know your universe. Inner space is as vast as outer space. So I thought, yes, meditation, prayer, blessings, contemplating solutions, that was all great, but I realized that technology would give us the opportunity at the speed of light, at the speed of thought, like we're doing here now, to reach thousands of people, potentially millions of people. And with some of the big events that I got involved with and was fortunate to be part of, I started to realize that collective consciousness really does matter. Creating an egregor, an aggregate of energy, elevating the frequency and consciousness of humanity is what helps and can move us toward awakening, toward graduation. Part of what I'm going to talk about a little later. What does graduation mean to an individual, to a group, to the human race? So I was very fortunate to be drawn into a project called the First Earth Run. And it was the first Olympic-style torch relay, where people carried the torch block by block. Some people paid, and it was a donation or contribution, charitable. And they would hand the torch off like runners in a relay, one person to the next. That was in 1984, a while back now. But the first Earth Run and Olympics torch relay for world peace and human unity was an extraordinary little event. It did get some attention globally. I think we reached 60 some countries where we actually participated. And a women's team carried the torch to the top of Mount Olympus, to the tallest mountain in the world. For some reason, it escapes me at the moment. But Jacques Cousteau's family, Jean-Michel Cousteau, one of my partners, Mark Morantz, helped put together a taking of that torch down to the bottom of the ocean with a magnesium fixture. The Pope held it in France at the Arch with, I think, 2 or 3 million people. And so it was kind of a first taste of being able to reach a lot of people. And I believe we reached hundreds of millions of people. Every Friday for a while, there were updates on Good Morning America. And so that was rather interesting because it gave people an opportunity to see the high points. Because of that project and the involvement of one of my dear friends and close partners at the time, it was Hal Uplinger. Hal got together with Mike Mitchell and Bob Geldof, and they shook hands and decided to do Live Aid. And the folks organizing Live Aid initially didn't really know how to execute it because nobody had done a global broadcast to reach 2 billion people. And so Hal Uplinger was my partner, producer, executive producer. I was on the executive staff as an associate producer. Tony Verna, one of my partners, was the worldwide television director. And my partner in SynSat, which we bought later and turned into Skylink satellite communications, Jim Tuverson Jr., he was the worldwide architect and configurer of all the satellites reaching 5,000 Earth stations in 165 countries. We made history. But when you stand on a stage and know that you're linked live to 2 billion people, it does something to you. And I've never recovered from it. I tell people often when they have an epiphany, a revelation, realization, or a peak experience, may you never recover. And that's the effect it had on me. So as I look back at Live Aid, it was the first. We got involved in a couple of the Farm Aid concerts. There was Our Common Future, World Environment Day, and others that reached variously 600 million, a billion and a half people, 2 billion people, and so on. And so Earth Day 50 Live was intended this year, April 20th, I believe it was the Saturday before the actual Earth Day. And we had 46 cities around the world plugged in and ready, preparing to host stadium-sized concerts. And so when the COVID virus came along, it kind of dashed that. Starting with China, we lost 4 cities. And then it kind of just rolled across the world. And it was a very difficult thing to see happen and to experience because we had put a lot of effort, probably a year for sure, a year's worth of work. And not so much the sake of just doing a concert or even supporting a good cause, because there are many, but reaching billions of people and doing the global climate crisis concert and attaching a component that we call GPS, which is global problem solving. Our intent was to introduce probably 10 to 15 of the greatest technologies in the world that could solve all, not all, but human behavior is a really tough one collectively. But many of the other great problems and crises that we're saving are still addressable, reversible, reparable, and fixable. But the majority of the world's population doesn't know what extraordinary and magical technologies exist, a testament to the human spirit. Literally, we can turn this world back into an Edenic splendor like the Garden of Eden. It'll take some time, but just as we create the problems, often the pollution that affects the air, the atmosphere, the oceans, our land, our soil, and there are going to be after effects and consequences that can last a century or more. The same applies here. We can do magnificent things, extraordinary things, and stop creating the problems, start creating the solutions and not the problems, and actually heal and lift our world. So that's the middle part of what I'm going to talk about, the restoration portion. We have some restoring to do to help restore humanity, to help build humanity's, dignity and self-esteem and integrity. But I often fancy that the way to start, the place to start, is always with consciousness, always a matter of the human spirit. Because, as we all have heard many times by now, you want to change the world, change yourself. You want to heal or fix the world, heal and fix yourself, or work with people who can help you get there. And so this great awakening is really possible. But my first category of these 3 today, inspiration, restoration, and graduation, I'd like to start with inspiration, which to me is akin to, if I can don my mystical garb again and spirit. Inspiration is breathing the light of heaven. Just as we breathe air for respiration, we breathe the light of heaven for inspiration. So then there are a couple of considerations about that I'd like to share about inspiration, the way I see inspiration. I see inspiration as a higher octave of passion. Passion and inspiration are really the same thing at two different octaves, just like in our musical scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and back to do again, right? So inspiration to me is ripe and extremely ripe and mature passion. Passion to me is slightly younger and sometimes feistier inspiration. Both are wonderful. As we advance in years and in wisdom, we tend to move a little more toward inspiration, I think, and wisdom together. Passion never dies out because it's part of inspiration. But remember, passion often can be a hot flame and can create problems from time to time too, So there are acts of passion sometimes people regret. And so inspiration is important. As I said, breathing the light of heaven, what is that? That is being in touch with the center of the universe. One of my mentors, a great spiritual master teacher, used to say, when it comes to life and consciousness, the universe is a great circle whose center is everywhere.
For complimentary resources from my book, my complimentary e-course, The Power of the Question, or recommended reads, go to www.thequestion.com/resources. For more information on my coaching or mentoring, go to www.bernardo-moya.com.
It's easy to get passionate and inspired by that idea. So where does every breath originate? Every breath that we take, that we breathe, issues from source, because we are never disconnected from the universe. We can't be. Sometimes our attitudes and behavior tend to work in the opposite direction, but isn't it interesting how live spelled backwards is evil? What is evil? When we reverse energy, reverse direction, move against the integrity principles of the universe, source, God, truth, beauty, goodness, virtue. So it's important to know that when we breathe, we are also being breathed from the center of God, or the center of the universe, and from the center of the one, from the center of source that we are always connected to. Now, Immanuel Kant said something that I took issue with, because he was a brilliant thinker and wrote a lot in many respects in a great direction. But at one point he said something akin to man, and I'd rather say humankind. Humankind will never know God or the universe because God and the universe are infinite and humankind is finite. And Immanuel Kant was right about that from a standpoint, partly right, because he was talking about this cluster of minerals that we call the human body, which is finite, impermanent. He was talking about the human ego, which has its limitations, and suffers greatly from the tyranny of the senses. That's one of the problems that the body and ego have, is we're often overwhelmed by the senses. So I tend to suggest that one of the great purposes of humanity is to remember, which means reconnect. Reconnect to what? Again, to source, to truth, to deity, to divinity, to the infinite. And so in that respect, I disagreed with Immanuel Kant, even though his premise sounds correct dialectically if it isn't challenged. The finite in us cannot know the infinite, whether that's God or the universe. But the infinite in us can. And there are so many people still walking around in this world thinking even some very, very well-educated academics and scholars and neurophysiologists who think that everything, all consciousness, comes from the brain, which, again, is a very sophisticated biocomputer, one of the most impressive things we know of in the universe, because there are trillions of things going on in there, all the computing power in the world can't yet catch up to. But mind and brain aren't the same thing. And so I like sharing this because these are some of the revelations and realizations that I've had, and oftentimes studying with people who at times were far wiser than myself and most of us, and learning from them, absorbing like a sponge, so that we can romance the infinite. And I wrote once, romancing the infinite, it opens us at the deepest levels of our heart and soul, and allows us to bring out our deeper selves out into the warm and living light of glorious self-expression, like 1,000 white doves freed from a cavern of darkness. So imagination is extremely powerful. And where Kant said we can't know God or the infinite universe, the infinite in us can. So if you say one, I can say plus one. If you say a million, a trillion, I can say plus one. Like Einstein said, imagination in some respects is greater than knowledge. Knowledge at any given point is limited, as I shared with Bernardo yesterday. But imagination is not limited. It is proof that the infinite exists within us. So within each and every human being, there is a spiritual and creative giant that's struggling sometimes or striving to break free and find fullness of expression. And we do that by tapping the infinite within us. And we need to turn that light on first and know that the infinite does cohabitate with us. It's this journey that we're on. It's part of the divine. It's part of the universe. It's the one, the all, the macro inverting itself into each one of us, into its parts, and we're on this journey. What we do with that journey is part of how we write our own story, our own song, our own sculpture of ourselves. And it's what we do with our lives. So the more aware we become, of course, the greater the choices. So as I mentioned to Bernardo yesterday in our brief interview, if you want to see if you want to see consciousness, look at the universe. Look around us. Everything that exists outside of us, everything exists within us. But the entire world around us, the majestic mountains, the vast oceans, the great vault of the heavens with millions and millions of stars and galaxies, that's also contained within us. But that is consciousness at work. And when I say that's all contained within us, it's because when the macro inverts itself into you or I, into any of us, that door swings both ways. That's what the mystics learn. That's what the great initiates and the great lovers of life, the great saints often and masters learn, is that door swings both ways. So the same way as the macro inverts itself to the micro can swing that door back and look in the other direction and retrace ourselves, go back to source, learn to make that connection. And the more often we do it, the more empowering it is. The greater and greater the sense, the feeling, the connectedness to spirit is. And as I said before, may you never recover when that happens. It becomes foundational and we can build on that. So how do we apply this to daily life? That's one of the issues. I've known sometimes in my own process and others where they can become great at meditating, but not so easy at communicating, and people think, oh, you've gotten strange. You don't talk very much anymore. Your values have changed and shifted and so on. Yes, they've probably been enlarged and deepened and heightened and sensitized to be more loving, more compassionate, more gentle. I tend to write a lot of aphorisms. I've written thousands. One of them says, and it's one of my favorites, humanity is divinity in childhood. So think about that for a second. Humanity is divinity in childhood. So oftentimes I like to say, be kind to all of the world's people. Be kind to all of God's children. Be kind to all living creatures. But be kind to all people. Especially now, many people around the world are having a difficult time, a difficult journey. Be kind to all of God's children, all the world's people, because humanity is divinity in childhood. It's precious, and every single human life has more miracles going on in every single person than all the computing power in the world today can muster together. We need to appreciate that, respect that, and the intelligence behind it, and that created it. So, or launched this great cycle of creation that we're in. And so intelligence precedes form. Form follows function. So spirit can elasticize and evolve and plasticize whatever it needs. But intelligence precedes form. And so, as far as my perspective on the subject, if you want to see consciousness, look at the universe around you. There's so much that is beautiful and magnificent in it. And during difficult times, we need to get back to spirit, back to meditation and prayer, back to silence and quiet, back to center, back to source, because it's strengthening and it allows us to better handle and deal with the many things that are affecting us and challenging us today. So we've all heard also about talking heads and talking heads and talking heads. When we do our global broadcasts, we would often say we have talking heads, and that are filling some of the interstitial programming in between, artists performing or what the main, messaging is and so on. But with the advent of the pandemic of coronavirus and the impact it's had, I mentioned yesterday, shocks break the patterns of routine thinking and living. They really do. Maybe not for everybody, but for most people. And if they're severe or intense enough, probably for everybody. But shocks break the patterns of routine thinking and living. And so when we're in a situation like this, where we have a global environmental crisis and existential threat that is not waiting or slowing down going into neutral just because there's a coronavirus, then we have the coronavirus. We have some social unrest due to real and perceived, but very real, racial inequality and injustice. So we have some of that societal unrest. We have a greater division today than we've had in terms of income distribution and wealth between the haves and the have-nots. And that's creating more and more strain, and it's going to create more and more strain. An example is, since COVID is around, the global economy has lost probably $11.5 trillion. But some of the richest people in the world have never made more money faster. Huge amounts. Sometimes, a couple of people reaching 100 billion in a very short time. That's on top of many, many other billions. So during times like these, that's when we need not so much talking heads as talking hearts. And so we have a couple of projects in the hopper right now that we're looking at, and I'm not allowed to tell you what they are, or I would love to share them right now. It's a little early, but you'll see them. And one is a project to see what we can do to bring celebrities, motivational speakers, life coaches, self-help people, people who are very, very aware spiritually, what we can do to help America. And so we're looking at that right now, and that should be an exciting project that happens in the fourth quarter of this year. But what we need, instead of talking heads there, is we need talking hearts. So I'm telling everybody, we'll have our 50% entertainment in this event, but in this case, it's intended to be wise, passionate, inspired people sharing from the heart. So it's talking hearts. So remember, let your heart do more and more speaking for you, and you will find more and more ears to be willing listeners. I have a book that I've been working on, and it's called Like Lightning from the Heart, while we're talking about hearts, right? And it says, when on that day, this is the foreword, when on that day you finally awaken to the reality and splendor of incomparable divinity, life will leap from you to those around you like lightning from the heart. And so another aphorism I've written about religion, because sometimes people ask and you don't have much time, and so you can't go into a lengthy discussion about religion. But that's why aphorisms can be wonderful. I used to marvel at how some of the great souls would make a single statement that would sum up what it took me hours and hours and hours to speak or write. And so out of that realization, I wrote about religion, that truth has many faces, but only one heart. And so we argue over the faces, over the masks of truth, but never over its heart, never when we enter the heart. And so that's the commonality between all religions. No religion is greater than truth. And truth serves best those who live by it. So it's important to realize that when it comes to religion, nobody can have a monopoly on religion. Sometimes religions have different languages. They appeared in different cultures and societies at different times in our history. They all serve a noble purpose. But universal spirituality helps us to graduate from some of the structures of religion that become a little bit problematic. And often, I don't ever want to take religion away from anybody. I don't have that right, that power. I encourage people not to try to do so. Just encourage people to live up to their religion or to the higher precepts of their religion. And the wiser they become, the more in their hearts they are, the more beautiful their own religion will become, and the expression of it will become. Native Americans often had a very simple statement about religion. They said, if a man or a woman is good, if a man or a woman is honest, if a man or a woman is kind to others, then what they believe in is good. So the short version, if a woman or a man is good, what they believe in is good. And so faith is the power of things unseen. Religion serves a purpose. But there is exoteric outer religion and esoteric inner religion. And the inner hidden traditions have always been more for those who were willing to commit themselves to a deeper dedication, deeper practice, deeper commitment. And oftentimes among the masses, people say, well, I don't have time, or I would, but that's part of the challenge of life. Life is an adventure. We all have to find our way. And in one respect, what some of the mythologies represented, like the 12 labors of Hercules, there have been wise souls who have said these are things that every human being in one form or another will pass through. So it's interesting. Those challenges come along. In the meantime, I've talked about a little bit of some of my writings. I wrote a piece that I'd love to share because people tend to respond so well to it, that I call Gems. And it's, again, a testament to the preciousness of each and every life. And the infinite lives and the divine in each and every life, in each and every human being, certainly at a significant level and degree. And so we never know who it is amongst humanity that can fully bloom and blossom and enlighten, and thereby help the rest of the human race. So this piece that I wrote to testify or state a testament to the preciousness and magnificence within every human being is the following, again, called Gems. I'm sitting in a room filled with diamonds and emeralds, rubies and sapphires. Each one calls out for recognition, wanting to be cherished and wanting to be praised. But I sit in their midst unimpressed with all their dazzling, glowing and shimmering. You see, I'm thinking of you instead, and how dull this room full of treasures is. Compared to you, these gems that drive people mad, they're like dead leaves or dried up twigs. You see, I've seen your heart, your soul, your beauty, your magnificence. Next to you, these jewels can only fade. For your love, I would give 10,000 rooms like this. And that's a very real feeling, a very real experience. It's colorful, you can see imagery, but it keeps coming back to that which is most precious within us. Heart, soul, spirit, love, truth, beauty, goodness, virtue. I tend to say sometimes, if I were a king, I would play a game. If I were a king, I would close down all the schools until further notice. Shut all the schools down, and people go, "Oh my goodness, how can you do that? How dare you even suggest such a thing?" And they ask, "Why would you do that?" And I say, "Well, the schools are teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. They call the 3 R's, which aren't right. But if you teach reading, writing, and arithmetic to the masses, to the youth, to the children, but you don't teach virtues, values, and ethics, what are you doing really? You're educating students or preparing students to become ill-equipped to deal with life, with society, with adulthood, with knowing their place in the world, in society, the world, and the universe. By teaching virtues, values, and ethics, a person has a moral compass, an ethical compass. They can more easily understand who and what they really are, who and what we really are, a divine expression, an expression of the universe, consciousness in expression. And we can do so much better thereby, because oftentimes if we just teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, even reduce philosophy to a form of utilitarianism, the mistress of science and the concubine of materialism, that kind of education prepares our young people to become the spare parts in the machinery of an often more technical, more industrial, and even soulless society. And so the more we do that, the more we end up with the imbalances and some of the attrition and breakdown in our societies that we're starting to see around the world today. Even democracy is suffering around the world today. And there are many reasons for that, but I'll talk a little about that in a little bit. So remember, humanity is divinity in childhood. Let's teach, if you want to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, along with virtues, values, and ethics, to help awaken people, to help truly guide and strengthen them, help introduce them to the integrity principles, to the foundational principles, to their own source of existence, their connectedness to all things. That becomes a universal human instead of just a human. And that becomes an all-world human that can go anywhere and relate and be an asset, a good citizen of a community, a society, a planet, a world and a universe. So I invite you, as I always do all you can to remind people of what lives inside of us, who and what we really are, and that we too are source in expression. Humanity is divinity in childhood. We're all growing up. Let's grow up together and let's help each other in that regard. So I want to move on now to restoration, part 2 of my talk. And this one, I point out some of the problems that exist in our world. I think we're all aware of them. So this maybe serves as a reminder, or sometimes I just use language that will help. Word painting is fun. I wrote once that words spoken from the mind without the counsel of the heart are treasonous. They betray speaker and listener alike. But words spoken from the heart are not as empty shells, but rather the loving flowers that we cast into the minds, the hearts, the souls, and the lives of our friends. Again, remember, from talking heads to talking hearts. So here we find ourselves besieged. I already mentioned several of these great challenges that lie before us. And we do well to remember the opportunities that we have they in themselves are precious. In the Taoist tradition and the I Ching, crisis brings opportunity. They're almost inseparable, in the Taoist culture. So the global environmental crisis, it's an existential threat. It really ought to rally humanity. And along comes this interruption right when we were ready to do so and give it our best shot on a global scale.
For more information on collaborating, partnering, sponsoring, supporting, or speaking at any of our events, or finding out more about our legacy clubs, go to www.thebestyou.co. If you're interested in finding out more about the amazing content we have, please go to www.thebestyou.online and get your 14-day free trial now.
The COVID pandemic comes along. That crisis brings opportunity because, as I mentioned, shocks break the patterns of routine thinking and living. Many, many people around the world, great and small, young and old, every segment and sector of society, every culture on earth, in one way or another, is dealing with the pandemic, reflecting upon the pandemic. And I'm very much involved with a number of doctors and research scientists looking to find a cure, and we may have some pretty spectacular news really soon here. But as far as the COVID virus goes, there are a lot of people saying a lot of things, all kinds, from conspiracies on one side and another side and so on, being politicized, unfortunately. It is really serious. You just need to see what's going on in the hospitals and sometimes even at people's homes, where people from a dry cough in a few days collapse literally on their floors. So there's something going on there. It's a very rapidly mutating virus. There could be some very good news shortly. We need to do all that we can to bring an end to this and to get humanity rolling again. But as I was telling Bernardo yesterday, the coronavirus, it has delivered a substantial shock, and it's breaking the patterns of routine thinking and living. I've said to people, friends and associates, when we come out of the coronavirus, when the dust settles, when we learn how to live with it, because it may be around for a long time, or when we deliver a cure that may be able to literally stop it and all viruses. When we come out of this coronavirus, this COVID experience, socially, globally, individually, familially, organizationally, economically, industrially, but socially and globally, we really need to be ready to redefine humanity. We have an opportunity to redefine ourselves, redirect ourselves, reorient ourselves, and global society and culture. It's an opportunity the likes of which I have not seen previously in my lifetime. And I'm, as much as we're challenged, and I've been challenged by this experience. I was down for 34 days, and first time in my life that my lungs collapsed on me, and then a couple months later, a second time and a third time, with no other symptoms, my lungs were collapsing. It's a very difficult thing. It puts you up against your own mortality, and recreating, your relationship to the universe, to life, to the greater good. To what do I do with my time while I'm here in the world? Because we often don't know how long that is. So it's very important to realize that the coronavirus, for all the harm it does, there is an opportunity for some very, very good to follow it, especially if we ripen, if we mature, if we move toward graduation. If we rise above this problem, we solve the problem. And in so doing, who are we to be as individuals, as groups? Who are we to be collectively? Who is humanity to become? What direction will humanity take? So we have to present an alternative to the way that we've been doing business, the way we've been living our lives. And I wrote once that there is a way of knowing that goes beyond knowing as we know it. And I usually have to repeat it. There is a way of knowing that goes beyond knowing as we know it. When you know that way, it imbues your every breath, all your waking consciousness. It goes down into the marrow of this magnificent physical temple, this cluster of minerals that spirit animates and our souls animate. Feeling that connection with strength, with power, with clarity and conviction helps equip us to go out into the world and solve our problems and take care of each other. I have a chapter in one of the books I'm working on called Widening Circles. And it's a simple concept, widening circles, the curative power of inclusion. Look at our society today. And I'll talk a little more about that, but there is great pain around racism, and oftentimes African Americans in this country now and Hispanics, Native Americans are suffering higher mortality due to COVID than anybody else. And so we have to address these things. We have to move from racism to e-racism. And we're actually looking at some ways of doing some things to help people in, our inner city communities with COVID that could be very, very dramatic. But again, you'll have to wait probably a couple of months till you hear about this. Maybe a month, but maybe a couple of months. So in the meantime, addressing COVID as we come out of and emerge from COVID, or learn to deal with it and handle it, how we best manage it. Who are we to be? We don't want to be Homo sapiens brutalis, which is our distant past. We have a few remnants of brutalis still running around, living from the expression of paradigms from the past, from the remote and distant past, more primitive, more barbaric, more destructive. Are we going to be Homo sapiens materialis, where we're always preoccupied with it's all about money and property and assets and economics and work and survival and so on? And it's understandable because that's part of the human journey. It's part of our experience, our unfolding process, individually and as a collective. We put an awful lot of time into economics. Some of the people prefer to put a lot more and more of their time into spirituality and spiritual things. But in an enlightened society, economics and industry are the same. They're the same. So we need to move in that direction. And so when it comes to who we become, we need to help humanity awaken. Inclusion is very powerful and important. We need to work in a way that we can, as I said, redefine ourselves, redirect and reorient humanity so that we can live harmoniously in this world. And that brings me to technology. I have seen technology, been a bit involved with it, that has taken 1 million years of radioactivity with Geiger counters and equipment, measuring equipment, neutralized in 1 hour and 20 minutes, I think, 1 hour and 10 or 20 minutes. I have seen technology that we gradually don't need 1 gallon of gasoline, of diesel, to operate any motor or engine. And I know there are, electrical systems, electromagnetic, systems and devices. But what I've seen most of is a non-explosive form of hydrogen, the most prevalent substance in the universe. It's here in our atmosphere. It's part of our water and our air. And you can operate automobiles and ships and, in the near future, jets and airplanes, and even other machines, industrial machines and equipment, using either water or oxyhydrogen, and the byproduct of which is simply water vapor, so it does not pollute. There are technologies that can reverse the acidification of our oceans that's being caused by, the excess global warming. 93.4% of rising temperatures go are absorbed by the oceans, and it's causing acidification. There are technologies proven that can double, triple the yield of fruits and vegetables. There are technologies around that can sterilize anaerobic bacteria, bugs, pests, funguses and molds from food, so that food can be good, non-perishable for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in some instances. And when you taste it, you think, this must have just been picked yesterday. So imagine being able to double and triple the world food supply, even if we double it, and distribute the food to remote areas where people have some of the greatest problems finding food and drinkable water. And being able to deliver that food and it not perish and not need refrigeration, which makes it that much easier. I know of a water filtration system that I've been involved with and that people are working on, and I've got to get back in gear to assist them. That can purify, it can take out 99.999% of just about any impurity. Literally, doesn't require any energy. It's almost, like you pour the dirty water in, it filters. It's got a nano filter system, and people can drink water with impunity. And what was polluted water all around the world. One of the hydrogen technologies I was talking about produces fuel on demand out of the atmosphere. So you don't have to drag water around everywhere you go, and you don't have to go to filling stations. Imagine, the effects that would have on people. And you can create your own little power system where for 1,000 years, people have been flocking to cities. People will be empowered to move away from cities and go back into the unpopulous regions of the world and live a more quiet or quaint life away from, some of the craziness we find in some of our big cities and densely populated areas. So we have a magnificent future potentially ahead of us. And remember that from Earth Day 50 Live, we're going forward at first opportunity with One Earth GPS, global problem solving. And we're going to do that event. We're going to share these technologies for the world so the entire world can see what is available to us to solve our problems. So finally, we reach graduation and the purpose of civilization, right? I think it was Cicero, 2,300 years ago, said the purpose of civilization, well, it was at least 2,100 years ago, I'm not sure. The purpose of civilization is to bring humankind to an enlightened and cooperative state. We haven't quite reached that place yet. We need to progress and advance. We need to work cooperatively. We need to be inclusive. That's such a powerful, term and practice. Because as I said, I wanted to just reiterate or reinforce a point about racism. People who are racists typically are not progressing. They're resisting the universal constant of change, right? Everything in the universe is moving, renewing itself from microsecond to microsecond. Racism is not doing that. Racism is a retarding force, a regressive force that doesn't allow us to shake loose of an addiction or a practice. Anybody who wants to be cured of racism, it's very simple. Volunteer to be enslaved for a while. Believe me, anybody, the hardest case there is, would be cured in a short time. We need to move towards sustainable civilization. Like I said, romance the infinite, allow it to become an extension. Our technology is an extension of our interpretation, our grasping with the infinite, like Ben Franklin did when he pulled that kite down and brought electricity into dynamic phase. So Bernardo, 30 more seconds to close.
Thank you.
By doing the right things, by working together, by really embracing the challenges before us and recognizing them as an opportunity, by leaving our egos at the door, at the gate, wherever the problems come up, wherever the projects are, wherever the movements are, work together, empower greater humanity, and in our process, by solving the problems here, we earn the right to graduate. We earn the right to create a new story because we are creatures of the story. Human beings love stories. Let's work together, all of us, in a way we've never done. Double our efforts. Doesn't matter how much we've put into it. And come together, work together, and create a new story that's inclusive of all humanity, that solves our problems, and that lifts us into a more enlightened and cooperative future. So, Bernardo, thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Sorry, I was on mute there. I was just saying that there were so many lovely comments about how inspiring you are, Doug, and how amazing and how much wisdom. So we can listen to you for hours.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm very, very grateful for you being here and for sharing your wisdom. And stay safe. Thank you so much, Doug.
It's my pleasure. And remember my promise, as we do our projects, I want to take the best you along with us, on a large scale. So I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing.
You know I'm in. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank
Blessings.
you. Thank you.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.